Risk assessment and prevention. Topics to be covered in this module. Assessing the risks. What is risk assessment? Who may be harmed? What are the 5 steps of risk assessment? How to identify hazards and evaluate the risks. How to record, review, and update the findings. Preventing the risks. How to reduce the risks. Things to consider when trying to reduce risks. Safety control measures. Assessing the risks. Any type of work that involves potentially harmful or dangerous tasks, if not fully mitigated, must have an appropriate risk assessment prior to commencement. What is a risk assessment? It remains the responsibility of the employer to ensure that an accurate risk assessment of a task is performed, either by themselves or a reputable and competent individual. As the name suggests, a risk assessment is a methodical and thorough examination of a workplace and/or situation. This should be immediately followed by a recorded identification of all potential harmful elements and appropriate mitigation for them. UK law recognises that not all risks may be realistically removed, but it remains desirable that they are identified and that all possible protection for employees and workers are put in place. Who may be harmed? One of the basic requirements of a risk assessment is identifying those who are at risk. This can be as easy as listing the workforce involved in the tasks, but should also take into consideration those workers and bystanders who may be in the vicinity. Even supervisors or rescue workers should be included in the report. So, whilst compiling the details during an assessment, the following individuals should be looked at for possible exposure to harm during the upcoming work. Employees, self-employed workers or contractors, members of the general public or bystanders, especially when there is overwork going on. Visitors or guests to the premises where the work is taking place. Neighbours or those who work in the vicinity of the work. You should also give special consideration to any workers or individuals that may have special needs, such as expectant mothers or disabled visitors. What are the 5 steps of risk assessment? There are basically 5 main stages or steps to a professional risk assessment. These are: identify all the possible hazards that exist during the task. Decide who is at risk and how they may be affected. Evaluate each risk in order of priority and the precautions needed to mitigate them. Record all your findings and implement the recommended procedures and protocols. Review the assessment and update periodically if necessary. Note: it is a legal requirement for an employer to document and store risk assessments in writing if the workforce numbers more than 5 people. How to identify hazards and evaluate the risks. An employer should use several straightforward methods to identify possible hazards and dangers during an assessment. These should include reliable and honest feedback from employees, workplace inspection and observation, reviewing recent accident and incident records, data sheets or builders' surveys that may be available, any useful statistics from facilities management. Any further factors that may affect risk levels should also be explored. This would apply to the environment, space allowed to work, etc., occupation, the nature of the work, etc., and human interactions, the training needed for the task, etc. After all appropriate hazards and risks are identified, they must be evaluated and controls must be put in place until the danger level is as low as reasonably practicable, sometimes known as ALARP. This may result in several practices being put in place, such as warning signs and cordons being placed around the work area, attempting less risky methods of performing the work, making PPE, personal protective equipment, available for use, restructuring the work area to reduce unnecessary exposure to non-participants, retraining staff or bringing in contractors. How to record, review, and update the findings. As mentioned in previous slides, it is required by law that risk assessment findings should be documented when the workforce numbers more than 5 people. However, this is still considered good practice if you have fewer employees than that. All the relevant information should be manually written or electronically recorded and documented for future reference. This can either be on physical date sheets or PC files, as long as they are readily available. The information in the record should include names of all staff involved and interviewed, details of any inspections before and after the work, each hazard or risk that was noted during the assessment, actions taken to mitigate every risk or hazard noted. In order for this assessment to remain valid, it should be periodically updated and checked every time there is a significant change or development in the work area. This should include any events or incidents such as recent employee feedback, accidents or near misses in the vicinity, improvements or changes to the environment, identification of training requirements, preventing the risks. Once a risk assessment has been completed and documented, the focus must then switch to preventing potential accidents from happening. How to reduce the risks? The first thing to consider when planning working at height is whether this task can only be performed in that manner. For example, could extendable equipment be utilized? How to reduce the risks? In many cases, that will not be possible, roofing work, etc., and a risk of significant fall may always exist. So, the appropriate safeguards and safety protocols should be installed to mitigate this. This could include sturdy safety or guardrails, reliable working platforms such as MEWPs, mobile elevating work platforms, or tower scaffolding, wearable harnesses for employees, safety nets placed beneath the place of work, airbags placed below the place of work. The risk of falling equipment or stock should also be considered within these parameters. Things to consider when trying to reduce risks. Mitigation of risks and the use of safety equipment will always be subject to many factors in the workplace, and certain circumstances may prevent the best options. These mitigating factors may include available space. Is there room for an extendable ladder or airbags? Working environment. Is there a sloping area? Are there fragile sections? Adequate clearance. Is it possible to set up scaffolding or guardrails? Are there power lines or bridges nearby? Duration of work. For work that takes more than a day to complete, scaffolding would be desirable over MEWPs or ladders. The distance of a potential fall. Would it be more practical to use harnesses or safety nets? The distance of the fall could decide this. Number of people. The number of people working at any one time could affect equipment use. For instance, a large group could prevent the use of harnesses. Type of work. Do heavy loads need to be transported vertically? Does the area need to support other equipment? Weather conditions. Is the work taking place outside? Does the forecast predict high winds or rain? Safety control measures. Control measures for fragile surfaces. Fragile surfaces are generally considered to describe any area that will not safely support the weight of a human body. The presence of a fragile surface should always be identified before working at height takes place. Examples of these surfaces would include materials such as fiberglass sheeting, skylights, cement or asbestos roofing sheets, untreated glass panes, unsupported boarding. In order to mitigate risks when working on fragile roofing, various options should be explored, such as working on the task from above via cherry pickers or platforms. Otherwise, the dangerous areas should either be fixed or supported beforehand, and the area should be protected by guardrails or elevated walkways. Control measures for vehicles. Where large vehicles are concerned, the bulk of falling accidents occur when unloading or loading takes place. Special care and precautions should be taken at these stages. When performing those tasks or any other work at height on a vehicle, the following measures should be taken. If possible, park the vehicle so that work can be undertaken at a consistent level, that is, a loading bay. Mark appropriate equipment available, ladders, movable platforms, forklifts, etc. Make use of non-slip materials in and around the vehicle. Place airbags, netting, or protective flooring around the vehicle during work. Make a harness or body protection available whilst work is commencing. Control measures for roof work. Roofing work remains potentially hazardous at all times, so the control measures you consider for this work are especially important. The most important factors when ensuring the safety of roofing work are the methods of getting on and off the roof. Properly secured stairways and stable access points should be available. Edge protection. There should be at least some minimal form of protection to prevent accidental falls. This should include guardrails and toe guards. Work platforms. These should be secure and stable, allowing for unimpeded work actions. Fall mitigation. Objects and equipment to mitigate falling injuries should be employed. This would include safety netting, airbags, and personal harnesses. Falling material. Building debris should be secured or carefully disposed of via rubbish chutes to protect bystanders and workers alike. Training. UK regulations state that employees should have sufficient training or instructions to perform all aspects of their work, which would include working at height. Where appropriate in a busy environment, there should be regular team briefings to appraise staff of existing training requirements and any upcoming developments. Any training should include these following factors: equipment inspection, fault reporting, environmental cleaning and organisation, placement and use of PPE and emergency devices, available manufacturer instructions and manuals, accident reports. Emergency procedures. Every risk assessment and work plan should take into account the unexpected incidents that may develop into emergencies. This may result from a person becoming trapped at height, as well as other obvious risks of falling. An emergency procedure plan must be in place and known by everyone participating in the work. It is also essential that witnesses and bystanders alert the appropriate authorities in case of a serious accident. However, it remains the legal responsibility of the employer to act upon a previously agreed rescue plan without merely relying upon emergency 999 services to initiate any actions. Working at height rescue templates are available online to guide employers through the necessary steps and checks. Summary. In this module, we have covered the following points. A risk assessment is a record of all potentially harmful elements and appropriate mitigation for them. Assessment exercises should also include non-employees. There are many ways to accurately identify the different types of hazards on the job. An employer has the responsibility to factor in any external elements during an assessment. There are many recommended control measures to protect employees from harm. The awareness of emergency procedures and sufficient training are key components of an assessment.